Thank you for all of you who are here. I'm Mário Freitas. I'm the curator of Jack Kirby's exhibition here in Amadora Festival. First of all, I'd like to thank the presence of these three gentlemen here. On the left side, we have Bechara Maalouf, the collector of Jack Kirby's originals. In the center, Mr. Randolph Hoppe, curated from the Jack Kirby magazine, Jack Kirby Museum. And then on the right side, Mr. Kraft, also a collector and also from the Jack Kirby Museum. Rand, probably I'll start with you with a very schoolbook question. When did you start, or when did the museum started, and what were your ambitions?
Well, we became officially a corporation in 2005, and what inspired me was I was working with John Morrow with his Jack Kirby Collector magazine and some of his other magazines, helping him with his website, and I just had this sense that Jack Kirby deserved to have an organization that was a nonprofit. I had some clients in my career, my non-comics focused career of graphic design and web work, and they were small nonprofits. And I thought that Jack Kirby really should have a small nonprofit that would promote him and communicate him as a significant cultural and literary figure. It just seemed that he was, kind of in the larger culture, being seen as someone who helped Stan Lee, and I thought that Kirby really needed to have something on his own that would be, that would take him seriously. So I reached out.
When was that exactly?
That was in 2004, and I reached out to John, and he thought it was a great idea, and he helped me make contact with Lisa Kirby, Jack Kirby's daughter, who runs his estate, and she and John both agreed to become founding trustees. So those are the three founders of the Kirby Museum, and we did that in 2005. Again, that was the motivation.
The museum is not a natural museum, right? It's more like a file, lots of files you store, and all the originals the collectors, the members of the museum have. How does that work exactly? How do you organize that? Talk.
Well, there's two things. We're a virtual museum. That means the biggest part of our museum facing the public is online. And we have our collections archived in Hoboken, New Jersey, which consists of thousands of photocopies from Jack Kirby's photocopies that he did back in the 70s, and some of them are on display here. And so we have a storage area, and we have some original art, but not a lot. And then we started a digital archive, and we travel around the country and sometimes into other countries promoting Jack Kirby, but also scanning art from original, from the collectors, and also from art dealers such as Bechara over here.
Well, that's a good way to introduce Bechara. Bechara, you're a dealer of high-end comic books and original art since, I believe, 30 years ago, as you told me. When did it begin, your particular interest for Jack Kirby?
Well, listen, of course I've been collecting. I think it's in my blood to collect a lot of things, but I think it started when I wasn't born in the United States, so comics was a very big deal for me as a little boy, growing up in Beirut, Lebanon. So comics, American comics. So as a little boy coming over to the United States, it was natural that I picked up comic books. And at that time in the 70s, Jack Kirby comics was everywhere, even though I didn't recognize who Jack Kirby was. until I was probably 12 years old in New York City, walking around the streets when my mom from Boston, we were in Boston, came to New York, and I discovered this old comic book store and bought up issues of Fantastic Four from the 60s and X-Men, early X-Men from the 60s, and I'm like, oh, this is the same guy that I've been reading and enjoying his art for many years. I'm like, wow, this guy is important. So it really brought home to me that this is a special man. So every time as a kid when I would say, oh, Jack King Kirby, now I understand why he's called Jack King Kirby. So of course it was natural. And it's more, maybe it's more natural in America to be crazy collectors because they're everywhere. I think, you know, the reason I stuck to collecting was it was a way to bring back my youth, you know, where there's such joy of, you know, remembering you as a 10-year-old picking up that comic book and these characters that become meaningful to you, especially if you're an only child, which I was, and looking and like, oh, memories, you know, we're isn't that what we, you know, we're all strive for, to bring those memories back to us that mean a lot, and it's usually from our youth. So Jack King Kirby was all over comics and brought great joy to a boy. So of course it was perfect for me to collect art and deal in comics, and this was my way of collecting also. I could deal and collect. Perfect situation for me. So, and when I met these guys that spent a lot of their time, money, and energy to promote and to show the world Jack Kirby's art, I was like, okay, this is a worthy project. They would scan pages from all over the world. They travel usually on their own money. They go to shows everywhere. They take the pages of art from anybody they can, scan it, so we can have a perfect representation. So when you go to the Kirby Museum or What If Kirby, you're able to go and look really closely at Jack's work from thousands of pages. So it's amazing what they're able to do, and you know, I've always applauded what they're doing, and I'm thanking you for bringing them here and showing the world what they have to offer, and it's a great thing. So, there you go.
Just another question for you, Bechara. Was it really hard to find Jack Kirby's originals? Because, as you should know or not, during the 60s and until the early 70s, most of the original art was not returned to the artist, and most of it was destroyed. And fortunately, some people, I don't know if steal is the right word, but some people stole it from the warehouses where the art was stored before it was destroyed. So how hard it was to find those originals?
Well, the funny thing is, my very first piece of art was by accident, because I was collecting comic books and I was buying collections if I could. That way, when I bought collections from somebody, I would keep what I wanted and sell the rest so I can buy more comic books. And I remember going in Massachusetts to a man's house, and I bought some of his comics. He said, hey, I have a piece of artwork. Would you be interested? And this was probably like 1985. And he brings out a page from FF 44. I think it's 44. Large art, because in 1968 the art was much larger. Pre-68 the art was much larger, and I think this was around 66, 67. And it was Jack Kirby, Joe Sinnott, my favorite combination, followed by, of course, Mr. Royer in the 70s. And I'm like, wow, how much is that? He goes, $75 good? I'm like, sure.
Is that the page with the humans?
This was a page with half a splash with Medusa and Dragon Man
Dragon.
And at that time, I didn't know if it was a good price or a bad price. I'm like, that sounds good. I'll buy it. So of course, I mean, that page now is probably worth $22,000.
It was a pretty good
It
deal.
was a pretty good, I'm like, ooh. So the funny thing is, my first page of any art was Jack Kirby, and it was very reasonable, and I didn't realize how hard it would be for so many years to buy into Jack Kirby art. Of course, nowadays, with the advent of auctions and big shows, and everybody knows artwork, oh, this is, special. Back then, for like 10 years, it was not easy. Because then I would go and set up at a show and like, do you have any artwork? Do you have any artwork? Do you have any artwork? Nobody really had any artwork. The places you could find artwork was in New York City. New York City, where the people, a lot of the stuff was created there. A lot of the older dealers that were established in the United States, that's where they were setting up. A lot of the artists lived in the greater New York area because of Marvel and DC. So that was a great place to buy art. But if you didn't look for it, it was not easy to find artwork. If you weren't astute enough. At that time, I didn't know. But when I discovered that I could get it, then, I worked hard at looking for it. Nowadays, you can get on the internet, you can go to an auction, you can go anywhere. But certainly for a generation, you could find it if you knew how to, but it was not easy to find it.
But did you ask that gentleman how he did happen to have that page?
I did at the time, and of course I'm like, oh, do you have anything else? The thing is, every once in a while, people would go to these shows. In Boston, there was the Sunday Funnies, and he had gone to a show called the Sunday Funnies in the late 70s, and he said, oh, somebody had it, and I bought it. So you could go to a convention, a comic book convention, which were around in the 70s and 80s, but not that many around the country like New York. New York, you could go probably every few months, and there was a show going on. Where in California, of course, San Diego Con was once a year, and you might have another show somewhere. But there weren't many shows in the 70s and 80s until about mid to late 80s. Shows became more a regular thing on the East Coast. And then of course, by the 90s, it started really growing. And by the 2000s, it blew up. There's shows, especially because of the advent of the movies, where we have it everywhere in the world now.
Tom, what about you? When did you start collecting? How did that happen, and how hard it was?
I started collecting around 1997, and everybody in the industry was telling me I was too late, that everything's very, very expensive now. And I started by going to a small show for comic books, similar to him, to Bechara, and I just happened to see a dealer there that had some original art. To be honest, I had no idea that even existed, that original art was big size, and I got shrunk down to put the comic book and so forth. And so I bought my first page there. It was a black pamphlet page from issue number 3. And then I started getting a couple more pages from the book, and I wanted to collect the whole book. But there's a lot of his art is all distributed among many different people, and it's very hard to find a complete book. So I never was able to do it, and I eventually sold it all. But that started me down the road, and I'd go to San Diego every year from Boston and bring money with me, and back then I could afford it, but nowadays I can't afford it as much as I could back then. The prices are going too high.
When did you start your cooperation with the museum?
I started in 2008, 7.
I think you suggested, Tom. I started the museum. I started the museum in 2005. I think in 2006 you actually suggested the digital archive, and I went out and got the scanner and started scanning. And then since you were going to the shows, and you had met Bechara, I guess, at some point too, because I think I met you before I met him. I think at a San Diego show.
Probably.
But then, since he was coming to the shows, I was like, well, why don't you do some scanning as well, my friend? And then he came on and started volunteering a lot, and Bechara's been donating space for us at his booth for us to do the scanning, and it's. But I think it was. I think it was '06.
An important question I still didn't make. Did any of you actually meet Jack Kirby while he was alive?
I did.
All of you?
Nope.
Want to share how it was, Bechara? Well, maybe you now, Randy.
You probably have it.
Oh, the microphone is with you.
When I was young, I lived in the New York City metropolitan area out in the suburbs. My father would commute into Manhattan every day on the train, and I got hit by the comic book bug and became a comic book fanatic. And it happened with Jack Kirby and Commandium, the Fourth World. So I was really, really excited about Jack Kirby, and we were at home one weekend, and there was a piece on the local news about the fact that there was a convention in the city. So my father and I went into the convention, and it was great. And I think I was 13 years old. And the next convention, I went into the city, and Jack Kirby was there, and he had a room off the main room. So there was a big dealer's room filled with comics and art, but then there was a smaller room, and he had it all to himself. And my buddy and I, we were so excited about the idea of seeing Jack Kirby and having him sit there watching him draw these sketches. The problem was that we probably brought $13 each to buy comic books, and I bought a Black Light Fantastic Four poster that I couldn't bear the thought of a $10 Jack Kirby convention sketch. It was just gonna wipe my whole, put my money out. So how could I do it? But we did stand there and watch him draw, and that was really fun. And I believe we did that one more time. Jump ahead to 1991, 92, where I was very interested in the early, like the virtual reality stuff that was going on at the time. There was a magazine called Mondo 2000, smart drugs, virtual reality. They were kind of techno hippies. And I enjoyed that. Philip K. Dick and all that stuff was just part of this. It was early cyber culture. And I was on a message board. So this is pre-World Wide Web. We're on internet message boards, and I'm dialing in and going to a database in San Francisco, in the Bay Area, and we're just having these text chats. And one of the chats was for this magazine called Mondo 2000, and we started talking about how Jack Kirby was like, he was the guy. Like, it wasn't just Philip K. Dick, it was Jack Kirby. Like, we really, and Kirby's alive, and he shows up at comic book conventions. So this guy, Andy Meyer, who I met through this chat board, we agreed that we should interview Jack Kirby for this magazine. He sent a few copies of the magazine to Jack and Roz, set up an interview at the San Diego Con. We flew to San Diego and met Jack and Roz and went to their hotel room and interviewed them. And the audio and the transcription is on the web. It's a very, very interesting late, he passed away 2 years later. It's a very interesting late interview, and of course I've transcribed it and listened to it a few times, and I realized that Andrew was very well prepared and I had not prepared at all. So he had all these great questions, and I was just kind of there for the ride. But it was great. They were very kind. My grandson was there, and that was my experience meeting him.
What about you, Bechara?
Mine is not too elaborate. It's I was 8 years old, and no, I wasn't. I wish I was 8 years old meeting Jack Kirby. My God. No, I was set up as a dealer in New York in the probably mid to late 80s, and I'm usually, if anybody was at a show, certainly back then or the next 20 years, I tend to take my time setting up. I'm very laid back. And people are like, when are you gonna set up? So especially that day when I was setting up, I was, it was mostly books at that time, and I'm putting books out, and Jack Kirby walks by my tables in the morning, heading toward probably his safe office. And I just left everything there. And at that time, I had a lot of expensive books, and I just didn't care. I just followed behind him. I'm like, oh, it's Jack Kirby. I'm following behind him, and you know, thank God the doors weren't open. It wasn't like everybody was in the room yet, so it was just the dealers, and I just followed him all the way to where he is. And I just watched him, and a few other dealers were just looking over their shoulders, and I'm like, oh, what do I do? Of course, I was always like, oh, I can't, I better not say anything. So I just stood there for a few minutes while he's setting up, and like, all right, this is a nice moment. And I just turned around, went back to my booth, and I'm like, wow, that was Jack Kirby. So I didn't really go out. I mean, I've had the opportunity after that, you know, at least to shake his hand a few times, but that was my first meeting, was saw him walking by. I was like, oh, wow. You know, come on. What do? You just drop everything and just follow.
That's a funny thing, because Jack Kirby was a small man, right? But he seemed to exude that strong personality, that strong character that draw people to him, right? It was like he was the king on the outside, or maybe in the inside. So, as you both share with us now, you were kind of, I don't know, shy to meet him, and so, but he was really nice to everybody, as far as I know, right? He spoke to everybody. His phone number was in the phone book, and everybody could call him.
Right.
Mike Roy said here yesterday that people went to their house, to Jack and Ross' house, and Ross cooked homemade cake for them. And
Yes.
so, how is it possible to be a man like this? I mean, he was an idol for everybody, so that would be unthinkable to happen today, right?
I've wrestled with that question for a while, and I think one of the things has to do with how solitary his work was, and that he would spend so much time with himself and his pencil at the table, that he appreciated company, just on that level. But I think one of the things that what happened when he was growing up, he was in the ghetto, and it was a pretty rough life. But one of the things that he experienced was that he joined a club where he and his friends were put together and given their responsibilities so that they would have their own little organization where they had a government and a society. So they had like trials and newspapers and you know, mayors and all kinds of things that Kirby got involved in. It kind of was a civilizing influence on these wild street kids. And I always was trying to figure out why when he left that, and he felt that the guy who ran that club was his second father. And I think when you see things like the Boy Commandos, the Newsboy Legion, and the X-Men, where they have the kids who have a mentor, that's coming from Kirby's experiences at this Boys Brotherhood Republic. I think that the open door policy that the Kirbys had, or I propose that their open door policy had a lot to do with Kirby feeling that he was a mentor to people who liked science fiction, mythology, and comics, and that those were his people, and that he wanted to somehow, he was just there and open and welcoming, and I feel like that was very, very good for all the people who talk about him in that way, and how important and great that was for him and for them. And that was a great thing that he did. That was his mentorship for his people.
No, and it's easy to see with the images we've been having here, people cosplaying as characters created by Jack Kirby, that his legacy lives on, definitely. If you look what is probably the most popular collectible today in the world, the Funko Pop figures. We have some in the exhibition. Most of them, or some of them, are characters created by Jack Kirby. In the movies, well, we don't have to talk about it. All the Marvel movies now, the Batman vs Superman, the Justice League movies with dark side looming in your horizon, and Jack is everywhere. We've also seen, well, this is where probably Jack worked most of the time, so
right.
yeah, it doesn't look very comfortable at all. And we've also been seeing the artist editions that IDW has been putting out, and I believe you as collectors and the museum have greatly contributed to that.
Yeah.
So, did they approach you? And how did that happen?
They started the artist editions, and actually we were in many of the cons ourselves scanning art, and we were the first ones out there starting this digital archive. And IDW and a couple others, but IDW I think was the first one to create the artist editions. And I think we had some influence on that because we were out there archiving stuff, and they realized that there was a need for an original art book. So Scott Grunberg from IDW approached the museum and asked you guys, we really want to do some artist editions with Jack Kirby, because he had started some before, not Jack Kirby. And do you have any scans of Mandy or New Gods? And in fact, I'm talking to them right now about another book that they're going to be coming out with soon next year. So that's how it kind of started. And the museum, part of our mission is really to help the understanding and information about Jack Kirby, promote him. And so we find different ways of doing that. In this case, it's publications. We also go to events like this to talk about Jack Kirby. So for us to help a publisher, that's important to us. And generally, IDW gives us extra books to sell, and plus we get, and they've been very generous with their scans. They go out and scan as well. It's not just us. They have a big archive of Jack Kirby scans as well, and they've been sharing some of those with us too to help our archive.
And I believe you have provided some of your personal collection, since you have a lot of commandos and.
Yeah, absolutely.
Did they also contact you, Bechara, for the Marvel stuff of the 60s?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Actually, they just did in the Kirby exhibit. They have that big book, the Jack Kirby. It's a large art book. With
I know the
cover,
owner.
The cover of the right, the FF 58.
Yeah.
Is that what it is?
They call it the world's greatest artist edition.
Yes.
Yeah.
Because of the
So,
website.
So they have the cover has the Thing versus Doctor Doom.
Right.
So and they there's one piece that the museum's been trying to twist my arm to take a scan of, which I've been resisting because it was framed up. I said, okay, eventually when I change the frame, I will get it done. And they used that for their alternate cover, which was the FF72 cover, which is the Silver Surfer. They used that as the alternate cover. So they've been after me for that, and they finally convinced me. So I was able to give the museum, of course, the scan finally. But yes, I've let them use a bunch of, my first priority is not IDW, to be honest, because they're a for-profit. But what they're doing is wonderful to share with the world. But what the museum does is not for profit. So I always give the museum all my scans to save for posterities and forever. That way they have everything that I've ever had in Kirby available for the world to see, which is the most important thing to do. So
It would have been so great if all of this have happened when he was alive, right? Definitely. So we cannot turn back. So what you are doing is invaluable. Do you think will it be ever possible to show to the world, not to us, people who are into this, but to the global world, to make them understand that Jack Kirby is much more important than Stan Lee?
I I honestly believe in the long run that is what's going to happen, and that's the kind of work that we're involved in. We want to take as serious of a look at the work and what the men contributed to the great comics that people love and the characters that people love. And I think that even to this day, I've had experiences with children who have enjoyed the characters through the movies, who start browsing the internet and start realizing what the contributions of Jack Kirby have been, and they realize what a great creator he is. So I really think that that's going to continue.
And there's a funny thing, because I've read something said by Stanley himself when he openly stated that most of the time my artists did the stories because they were so good, and I just put the copy in there. Stan Lee himself said it. So why doesn't the Marvel reprint say at least plot and art by Jack Kirby, script by Stan Lee? I did that in the Legends, in the originals, that you don't understand Portuguese, but that's what's there.
Oh, good. Okay.
Story and art by Jack Kirby and script by Stan Lee. That's there. So why do you think Marvel doesn't do that? Is Marvel still so Stan Lee centered?
Well, yeah, they are. I mean, they are. I think there's a level of kindness that they're involved in with having had him around for a while. There have been. I actually did start a small project where I was tracking how the credits would appear in some of the reprint volumes or the different editions of the books.
It doesn't involve, right?
No, it had.
It had?
It had. There were a few times when something would kind of creep out, and it'd be like, oh, they did it, but then it would pull back. Like somebody noticed it, someone on Stan Lee's side. It's like, I have no idea, but they would always pull it back, and I don't know. It is frustrating and confusing that he still accepts a full writer credit. I will say also that
Jack Kirby is underground.
the what?
Jack Kirby is underground.
Oh, I know. It's his bathing suit. It's his bathing suit.
Okay.
He came in from a swim.
Yeah,
In the
okay.
pool.
Well,
Right there.
Right.
But I think one of the problems too, that seems like it's actually the problem with like Amazon listings frustrates me to know because of how inconsistent they are, and that all does end. The source of that are the publishers, and to still have a comic that's listed with a writer and an illustrator just drives me nuts, and that division, like they can't call them both authors.
And
Why can't they
sometimes
both
you have, for example, Fantastic Omnibus by Stan Lee.
Oh yeah.
Period.
Right. No, that's
Well,
No.
changing subject. We have this beautiful piece. I think this was colored by Jack himself, right?
yes.
Bechara, this is more for you as a dealer and collector, waiting as a collector. Just imagine today, if Jack Kirby was alive today and producing at today's pace, which means he could have all the time to produce one page every 2 days instead of 60 pages a month. He could color his own work. How much valuable would be Jack Kirby's art?
The funny thing is, I think part of the people that collect comic books and they're in the collectible itself, it's very easy when they come over and they see some art that I have hanging, but it's black and white. So there is that appeal to the true comic book collector. But every once in a while, when I have something in color, it draws people outside the industry even into it. Because we know color has that effect. So imagine if every cover original cover was actually in color. Oh my God.
But
I
colored
mean,
by Kirby himself.
Well, of course, I'm talking about in general,
yeah.
any artist, and then make it done, put it by Kirby in his hand. I mean, we have art in museums all over the world by now. I mean, it's such a draw to have things in color that, you know, and they'd be so valuable. I couldn't collect, most of us couldn't collect any of it.
The way Jack approached color was totally surrealist. And I was talking about that with Mike Roy yesterday. Mike was saying that if Jack kept producing, his work would start being much more surrealist. And his color, the few times he colored his work, it showed that, right? And I think the industry back then wasn't ready for a Kirby colorist, as maybe they weren't ready for that late Kirby, that abstractionist Kirby. What do you think about that, Brad? About his color style?
Well, his color style is incredibly vivid and highly saturated. We a lot of times the people who are the fans and the scholars, we love looking at some of the older pieces like the Simon Kirby work, where we try to, if we see pink, we say, oh my gosh, Kirby must have had something to do with that because it's pink. What's that pink doing on a cowboy cover? You know, but no, he really, it was all about drawing the eye and being really dramatic, as it's like as vibrant as a fight scene might have been for Kirby. He would make the colors just as vibrant to draw your eye. Just wonderful and really his own.
I remember a Spider-Man illustration he did for, I think it was for a fanzine in the late 60s. Then it was Spider-Man with two Sentinels. The Sentinels were colored in yellow or light green.
And green, yeah,
That's
lime
beautiful,
green. Yeah.
with lime green, exactly. But then Marvel said, oh no, that's stupid. And then John Romita drew a similar version but with Dr. Octopus and the Green Goblin.
Right.
But that Spider-Man piece, it's one of my favorite things. The color of that, it's brilliant.
And inked by Kirby. Kirby inked.
Yeah, he did.
Well, maybe Mike Roy did something, but I think
I don't know, because probably the way Kirby drew the webs, it was all over the place.
Right, yeah.
But I think it was so much ahead of its time that it's perfectly understandable. People didn't get it. Even Marvel didn't get it.
No.
Okay, we're approaching the end of the panel. What are your goals? Your next goals? What are you going to achieve in the next years, in the next months maybe? What are you going to do to keep this wonderful job you're doing? Maybe Tom now.
Go ahead, you have something.
Well, we've been doing pop-ups in Manhattan periodically for the past several years, and there were some photos of those passed by earlier. And we're talking about another pop-up in Manhattan in May, correct?
In May. Yeah, when the Avengers movie comes out. It's also Free Comic Book Day we have in the U.S., so it seems like it might be a great time to have some Kirby in New York City.
A pop-up museum is, they get a space, let's say as big as this, and then they're able to bring in a lot of art for people to come down for a weekend or a week. So the availability of having something in New York every year has been working out very well for them in the museum. So it's hard to invest the kind of money to have a museum dedicated to just Jack Kirby. And I think in the long run, if there was a museum dedicated to pop culture, to all kinds of art, we're not talking about fine art, we're talking about anime, cartoon art, strip art, where maybe Jack will have a wing on that, or maybe even someday, now that Disney has bought out Marvel, that we know Disney will probably build a theme park or something to do with the Marvel characters. Something in there someday you might see, and Kirby may have a hand, the Kirby Museum or something like it will be hopefully in there. So when you visit Paris and there's another theme park, or Orlando, or in LA, another theme park that's established with Star Wars combination, Marvel. Hopefully someday Kirby will have a hand in featuring some of the art there.
And well, Tom worked with IDW, and we produced this a book called Pencils and Inks that has Commandy #1, Bomac #1, and Demon #1, where you get to see on the left side, you see the photocopy of Kirby's pencils that they took, and then on the right side you get to see the version that Mike Royer inked and lettered. So it's a really great way to see the process that the books, that Kirby and then Royer, and how it was produced.
It's just a pity they did it in smaller size.
Yeah.
That's what everybody says. I tried to get it bigger. They didn't want to do it because they wanted to sell it online, like at Amazon, and in order to do that, it couldn't be the large size. And we're going to be doing another one. I just was actually talked to Scott a couple days ago, and it's going to be splashes, pinups, and covers. So you're going to see pencils and inks. And unfortunately, it's going to be the small size again. I'm sorry. Can't do it
Because I have all the others.
And
That one too. But
we have another book that we that's been put on for about a year because of the 100th birthday. But it's some rare Simon and Kirby funny animal comedy comics that we're going to put out in a publication. So that should be a lot of fun from the 40s.
all right. Well, our time has ended. Now we're going to do a guided tour of Kirby's exhibition right there.
Okay.
Thank you very much, the three of you, for this wonderful moment. Thank you all for being
Thank
here.
you.
Thank you.
Really?
It's funny because some people helped me.